Lewer Dakiopta Bogamidgerai and Ishkaji Sinn Féin Oireachtas Pearse Doherty.
And this is the last budget from this government, and like all others there will be a spending increase. But the question we must ask ourselves, like all other budgets, is will make the big difference that people need in their lives, the difference that they're crying out for? Will it address the housing crisis and make housing affordable as laid out by Sinn Féin? The answer is no, it won't. Will it fix the health service that is on its knees? No, it won't. Will it address the cost of living crisis in a meaningful way, for example, abolishing USC on the first €45,000 of income for all workers? No, it won't. And will it deliver the fundamental change that we need in our childcare system by introducing childcare at €10 a day for families across the state? Again, the answer is no. And the answer is no because this government is incapable of delivering real change, incapable of getting value for money. And people see through the spin. People hear about the millions and the billions, but they don't feel better off. For most people, it's about what they have at the end of the week. When the bills are paid, is there anything left, is the question they ask. And the answer for far too many is no. Workers and families can't afford another 5 years of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And it is in that context that this budget will be judged. How your parties will be judged also at election time. This government has been exposed over and over again as serial wasters. You treat the public with contempt when you waste taxpayers' money on every project, big or small. From a bike shed to the National Children's Hospital, to a security hut, to modular units from Ukrainians that are costing more than semi-Ds built with bricks and mortars. And that's the record of the ministers opposite. That is what you get after you get Fine Gael in office for 14 years. And no one takes responsibility, no one is held to account, and the merry-go-round goes around and round. Your government wasted €10 million on lawyers fighting a losing battle to deny the state €14 billion that you now want to dish out. Despite the budget you're announcing today, we still feel poor as a country in so many ways. In housing, in health, in disabilities, in mental health. And your job isn't just to spend money, your job is to get results. And that's where you're completely and utterly failing. Because what people see under Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael is a deepening housing crisis. Month after month, we pass new shameful milestones in housing. Record homelessness, record rents, record house prices, and nobody takes responsibility. And we have a Minister for Housing, and that's his record. And he stands up here and he applauds a government that doesn't provide any new additional social and affordable homes. Everyone suffers when this government fails to build the homes that is needed. Higher rents and higher house prices. Sinn Féin are committed to bringing home ownership back within the reach of working people. Now, this government is great at spin. You have talked over and over again about home ownership. Let me say this very clearly. Since this government came to office, house prices have gone up by €100,000 on average in Dublin. That's your record. The other record you have is home ownership has collapsed under Fine Gael for our young people. There are 100,000 less people under the age of 40 that own their own home today than when Fine Gael came into government 14 years ago. That is your record. You have halved the number of people who own their own home in that age bracket. And it's a failure so big, it's hard to believe. Fine Gael have more than doubled, on the other end, more than doubled the number of people who are renting in their 60s because they don't own a home. And at the same time, the number of people who are renting in their 20s has completely collapsed. And why? They're not renting. Why? Because they are in their parents' box room or they're on a plane on the way to Australia. That is the record of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and that's why we can't afford another 5 years of these two parties. Many of these individuals are nurses, there are doctors, there are teachers, there are other essential workers. And that doesn't just have an impact on them, on their families, but it has an impact on the wider public services that we all rely on as a state. In the Ireland of 2024, in a state where we are recording surplus of €24 billion, we have children with autism being denied their constitutional right to education. Let that sink in. In the Ireland of 2024, in a country where we have €24 billion of a surplus, we have a situation where children can't get assessment of needs, where parents have gone for years without therapies for their children. This is simple things, basic things, speech and language, the assistant that the child needs to be able to feed, to be able to speak, to be able to walk. And in Ireland of today, we are a poor country when it comes to issues like that. These are basic needs of a country that any country that is a first world country should be able to deliver. But under Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, you continue to fail these families over and over again. Families that are crying out for assistance. Assistance to help their child to speak. Assistance to help their child to eat. Assistance to families who are being left fighting for these basics for year after year. And the most glaring reminder for all of us in this House and outside is the government's failure for the children with scoliosis and spina bifida. Just in the last 24 hours, another parent had to go public with her child's story. Heartbreaking story. No parent should have to do that, because the state should provide the services for those most in need. No parent should have to campaign, fight, battle the state for what their child deserves. But under Fianna Fáil and under Fine Gael, in Ireland of 2024, with €24 billion of a surplus, parents have to fight. Parents have to expose their children to that. Parents have to battle every single day, and it is not acceptable. The longer they wait, the worse the condition gets, and it is a race against the clock, against the child's condition becoming inoperable. And today's budget, what did it do for them? It gave them no more hope for these children than they had yesterday. And that's what the budget will be judged on. This is a government that has all the financial resources but completely fails to deliver on basic services. And that's been the hallmark of this government's term in office. And you have squandered 5 years. You have squandered money and time. And you will be judged on that when the general election comes. Tá Sinn Féin chomanta do Oireachtaí ar fáil a rísta ibridní agus greagaíní. Tá an déan an rialtas lórs faoi Oireachtaí, ach tá tithí as a chéile taca Oireachtaí do ghaoine ága faoi Fine Gael. Níos lú na 100,000 duine is a tá faoi cara bíanda ís a tá in do Oireachtaí ná tháinig Fine Gael a gcuairt. Loidir siad bheith méid daoine ága a bhfuil deacha go héin faoi léid, agus uafasa an airde an repa chipsaithe seo is deachar a chreideal. Tá lína daoine atá císú is daoine na seacatí I mé airdú mar na bhfuil siad ébalta tithe a bheith acu. Agus iad sin atá daoine ága faoi fichidí níl siad a císú mar go bhfuil siad ar an balla ar an nimarcha. So a chuirde tá go leor daáil de dhéann seo, chuann seo isteach ar seirbhísí pobailí agus go héirí ar seirbhísí atá ghaoine ag breith athú. Mar gheallar an neaspa éitin ar scálanna, tíonmuid poistí atá grúachas na bhfuil ébalta a bunreacht líhúil a bhainte máise sin idehas ag an fonte seo, agus 120 poiste foicha gan scáil ag tús na scáil bíanna. Agus res in an plug do go leor teaghlaí, go héiríonn sin le spina bifida agus le scoliosis, agus níl aon rud déanta ag san bhaide seo le faoise hort an na teaghlaí seo go mé aon rud defriúil san chéin aisnes na sa bíanta amach róin. Ministers, this isn't a giveaway budget. This is a giving up on housing budget. And that's what it is. You have raised the white flag when it comes to housing, when it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to renters. This budget gives nowhere near the funding that is needed and that is required. That means the same inadequate social and affordable housing targets are being delivered. Not one additional house, social and affordable, are you planning to build next year than you have already committed to. Not one. You've completely ignored the Housing Commission's report, your own Housing Commission. It was a damning indictment of your government policy. They accused you of failing to treat housing as a priority. You know something? They were absolutely right. They called for a radical reset of housing policy, and this budget shows again that this government is incapable of delivering a radical reset that is needed. To not increase your targets at all is shocking. It's not only shocking, it is an insult to everybody who's struggling to get an affordable house or who's struggling to pay rent. And after 8 years at the Cabinet table, what we heard recently is that Taoiseach started talking about building more homes. But this budget exposes that that's nothing more than soundbites. Not a single increase in housing targets is allowed for in this budget. This is a Taoiseach who cares more about headlines than he does about housing, and this budget proves it. Sinn Féin has a plan. In government, we would deliver 300,000 homes. Sinn Féin called on you to deliver 21,000 social and affordable homes in your budget. 100% redress for those living with defective block and Celtic Tiger apartments. Not one penny more for those schemes, despite them being expanded. Regeneration of inner-city flat complexes. Those communities that have been waiting for decades. Nothing from this government. Sinn Féin would make sure that they were central. We need to tackle our dereliction in our cities, our towns and our villages. And that is the scale of the ambition that is needed. And Minister, you can shake your head all you want. You've sat at the Cabinet table, and you know something, every year that you've sat at the Cabinet table, the housing crisis got worse. House prices have gone through the roof, rents have gone through the roof, homelessness has gone through the roof, home ownership for the under 40s have collapsed under your watch. So I will take no lectures from Fine Gael or indeed from Fianna Fáil in this matter. What you need is the scale of ambition of which Sinn Féin has put forward. And the truth hurts, as we hear from the heckling here. A sore point. Not a single extra social or affordable houses above your existing targets have you provided for. We have long campaigned from the renters tax credit. Remember that one, Pascal? You fought me tooth and nail. You said it shouldn't happen because it would go into the pockets of landlords. You needed to do two things. You needed to do a tax credit and you needed to freeze the rents. You did one, you didn't do the other. You're as well as writing those cheques and putting them into the landlords' pockets yourself, Pascal, because that's what's happening. Because under your watch, under Fine Gael's watch, under Fianna Fáil's watch, what's happened to the average rents? Average rents in Dublin have increased by €1,100. That's for existing rents. If it's new rents, it's actually way higher than that. And across the state, it's the same. So the tax credit that you're giving is going into the pockets of the landlords. But I suspect that you knew that all along. And just another way to feather the nest of landlords, because one of the things that you didn't mention in your speech, Minister Chambers, is the fact that you're giving €112 million of a tax break to landlords this year as their tax breaks increase from 600 to 800. Every single official in your department told you that it was a bad idea, said that half the landlords in the state won't pay tax under this proposal. But again, it shows the priorities of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in relation to this. Childcare is an issue that this government has made a lot of sound about. But when we look at delivery, again, you fall short. Key to supporting families is the availability of affordable childcare. And Sinn Féin has shown how you could deliver childcare at €10 a day. And that would have been a game changer for families, but you wouldn't even go there. This could be delivered next year for all parents in centre-based childcare and TUSLA-based childminders, and then rolled out to all other childminders. Despite all your talk about supporting parents, we just now see that it is talk, because there is no further reduction in the cost of childcare planned for next year, and that is a fact. So a lot of spin coming from Mr Soundbite himself, but when it comes to substance, we see it here, that childcare costs will not be reduced, but the public will have their opportunity to decide if they want a real party with vision, with ideas, with plans, with commitment, or do they want some of the sound bites that we're hearing from government benches? Sinn Féin knows that the cost of raising a family doesn't stop when your child reaches the age of 18. And we would stand up for students and parents, and we do that by abolishing third-level fees, starting next year with a reduction of €1,500. Again, the government refuses to go there. You talk about a temporary reduction. What is required is the scrapping of third-level fees, and to start that immediately. And also scrapping fees for apprenticeships. And I want to make it clear to anyone, to any family, anyone starting a family, that Sinn Féin's commitment is clear. We will make raising a family affordable, and a family and workers are impacted by the cost of living crisis. The cost of living crisis, as we all know, isn't over. Energy credits of €250 don't cut it. It simply do not go far enough. We proposed €450 as an energy credit. The €250, and you know this, is mostly going to be eaten up by the increased charges that are coming. Households continue to struggle through the weight of high energy bills. Electricity prices in July of this year were 47% higher than they were 3 years ago. Irish electricity still remains the highest among Europe. And what's your record? 230,000 households were in arrears of their electricity bills. That's 20,000 more than there was last year. Things are getting worse when it comes to energy under Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And people are struggling with the cost of living in so many ways. We called on you to tackle this, to deliver a fair tax package for all workers, to give workers and families a break that needed their money put back into their pockets. Instead, what the government has brought forward again in this budget is a two-tier tax package. You picked winners, you picked losers. Someone on €150,000, they'll get €959 as a tax break, but a worker on €40,000 will get €369. Minister, you know this. You know that, well, Taoiseach, you know this. That's half of all workers in the state. Half of all workers in the state's tax package will be €369. And there was a fairer way to do this. Sinn Féin showed you, in terms of our budget proposals, how you could have cut tax fair, a way that benefits all workers, not the real low and middle income workers. That's what you should have done. We would have abolished the USC for the average worker. We would make sure that every worker does not pay the USC on the first €45,000 earn. But your way is a two-tier system that leaves average workers and the majority of workers in this state benefiting by less than €370. So everybody should have been given a fair share. As I said, Sinn Féin will stand up for ordinary workers and families. And compared to this, to the government, you haven't even given workers on the lowest wage a decent increase. Sinn Féin called for a €1.10 increase to the minimum wage. That would mean an extra €2,220 for our low-paid workers. Ireland has one of the highest rates of low pay in the European Union. And that didn't happen by accident. That happened as a result of government policy. We would support businesses' transition from lower wage employment with our £250 million PRSI rebate, targeted at employers most impacted by increases to the minimum wage. Minister, you didn't say anything about the gold-plated pensions because you snuck that out in a press release last week. But I've been responding to budgets for 14 years, and never once has there been a bigger tax break to an individual in those 14 years. This government has given a massive tax break to people with gold-plated pensions, increasing the standard fund threshold to give tax breaks to pension pots of up to €2.8 million. This gives an individual a tax break of €320,000. There has never been, in my time, and I guess even before that, a tax change that benefits certain individuals so much. But who's the only people that can benefit? Who's the only people in that kind of golden club that actually benefits from that? It's people who already have a pension pot of excess of €2 million. They're the only people who benefit from your €320,000 tax break. And I expect that sums it all up. Let's sneak it out a week before the budget so I don't have to stand up embarrassed here and announce a €320,000 for the wealthiest in Ireland. It is disgraceful. Disgraceful. Minister, our three banks made over €2 billion in profit in the first 6 months of this year, yet there is no increase in the banking levy, despite the billions of euro of windfall profits that they're making. The public sees very clearly where your priorities lie. Fine Gael were out in the media recently, well, you were issuing a lot of press statements, but you were out in the media recently getting very upset that Sinn Féin wanted to tax luxury private jets. But yet you gave a standing ovation to the Minister who's going to increase the price of petrol and diesel on ordinary workers, people who want to drop their kids to school, people who want to go to work, people who need to go to the hospital appointment. The reality is, and maybe you don't know this, the richest 1% are responsible for more carbon emissions than all middle and low-income workers together. Yet they are not being asked to bear their fair share of the burden. The government just jacks up carbon tax over and over again, which is a regressive tax, and it hits low-income and rural houses the hardest. And we already have one of the highest carbon taxes in Europe. Tax cuts for some, carbon taxes for everyone else. Sinn Féin's plan is very clear in terms of funding the green transition fairly. Now, if you ever wanted an example of a government incapable of delivering change, you only need to look at what's happening in terms of your health record. And it is absolutely heartbreaking, and I'm sure you know these patients as well as we do. It's heartbreaking to see what's going on. We have children in pain, we have children forced to eat through feeding tubes, children's conditions that are deteriorating, children that have to wait for months for life-changing surgeries, and money isn't the issue, as we know. We've been running surpluses for years. And time isn't the issue, because Fine Gael have been in government for 14 years. For God's sake, the Taoiseach was Minister for Health for 4 of those years. So it's not time, it's not money, it's your government. That's what's the issue. That's why we have the health service that we have at this point in time. And there are no more excuses. The new Children's Hospital, where Taoiseach Simon Harris signed the contract, is still not open and running hundreds and hundreds of millions overrun. Over and over again. Are you trying to deny you had any involvement in that, Simon? Is that what you're trying to say? Is that what you're trying to say? You had no involvement in that? Yeah. Seriously. And all the while, on your watch, the bill goes up. On your watch, the bill goes up. When BAM says we'll withdraw, Simon Harris says, no way. Keep going, and you kept writing the cheques. Almost a million people. Almost a million people. Almost a million. You finished, Taoiseach? Almost a million people, Taoiseach, are on waiting lists. And we've all been waiting. We've been waiting for this government to get its act together. But it hasn't happened, and it isn't going to happen. It's becoming harder and harder for ordinary workers to see a GP. Dental treatment for people on medical cards has collapsed. Mental health services in this state is threadbare. Everybody knows that. People who are reaching out, looking for that support, on the other side aren't getting it. And this is having a devastating consequences for our young people. Last year, in the face of all this, you knowingly underfunded health, one of the most callous decisions I've ever seen, and an extraordinary example of reckless management, which we in Sinn Féin and others called you out immediately on. The HSE called you out. Your own Department of Health called you out. Indeed, IFAC called you out. It took 9 long months for you to admit that you got it wrong in last year's budget. But it did real damage. It did real damage to the morale. It did real damage to the health service's reputation and to care providers' ability to plan. And that decision led to a year of chaotic financial management and a recruitment embargo. And all the while, the HSE were forced to become more and more reliant on expensive agency staff. So today was your opportunity to lay out a vision for health, to lay out a vision for hope. But there's no hope here in this budget. No vision, no urgency in your budget for health this year. You claim, again more of the spin, you're claiming a €3 billion increase for health. But let's be serious. Last year you underfunded health and now you're playing catch-up. €1.5 billion of that €3 billion is to cover last year's legacy deficit that you created. €1.2 billion is standstill money, means no improvement of services, just to stand still. So when you strip all of that back, and the fact that €240 million is already announced, pre-committed capital in the National Development Plan, it leaves you with €120 million for new measures. To cover beds, to cover urgent care, to cover women's health, to cover older people, to cover mental health, to cover national strategies. This is a paltry sum. And there is going to be chaos in our health system next year, just as there was each year before, because you're deliberately not making the types of improvement and the reforms and the funding that is necessary. It stands in stark contrast to Sinn Féin's comprehensive proposals. We had a plan to reform health service, to boost capacity, to train the workforce of tomorrow, and to reduce the cost for ordinary workers and families. We would take big, bold steps towards universal healthcare, delivering 150,000 additional medical cards today. That's what's needed. We'd slash the cost of medication for all households, reducing the drug payment scheme from €80 to €50. We'd phase out car parking charges, reduce prescription charges. None of this you have done. Sinn Féin would have funded a multi-annual plan to tackle overcrowding in our hospitals, and we would have delivered major investment for workforce planning to train the health service of tomorrow. We called on you to provide a social welfare package to support families, carers, pensioners and people with disabilities. And to protect people from the cost of living crisis in the here and now, and to make a lasting difference in people's life. To tackle social exclusion and poverty. And the Minister Donoghue, he stood up and he talked about child poverty being a priority of your government. 230,000 children are currently experiencing material deprivation. That's an increase of almost 30,000 children since 2022. So if that's a priority, you are fairly failing at it. The rise comes amid a 3% real decline in the average disposable income of households with children. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have failed families and failed children, and child poverty is deepening as a result. Child benefit is a crucial tool for tackling child poverty and supporting families. After Fianna Fáil crashed the economy back in 2008, they made children pay. Remember that, Michael? You've made the children pay. You've cut the child benefit across the board. Fine Gael, you've continued to put the pressure on children and families. Initially, listen, none of your bull. You cut the child benefit and you squeeze the children further. That's the reality. Micheál Martin, are you trying to deny that you cut the child benefit? Or is Fine Gael trying to say that you didn't make cuts to child benefit for later children and abolish the grants for multiple children? That's the reality, folks. Don't deny reality. Own it. Embrace it. Fine Gael then cut child benefit across the board. Fine Gael then cut child benefit across the board by a further €10 for the first and second children and a steeper cut for the third children. And today, the rate is still below where it was in 2008, despite the fact that we have €24 billion of a surplus. That is how you've made them pay during the austerity period, and you won't deal with it. That's why child poverty is getting worse under Fine Gael's look. That's why there's 30,000 more children in material deprivation under your watch. So that is the politics of today, folks. That is the consequences of your decision, and the decision to slash that support in the first instance by both parties and decide to keep it at that level. It is a mistake, and in a mistake that parents will pay a very heavy price for. The first test of a republic is how to protect the most vulnerable. The decision to increase payments for citizens with disability by only €12, given the high cost of disability, is simply unacceptable. What should have been provided is what Sinn Féin proposed, a €20 increase in the weekly rate of disability-related payments. We also proposed a more substantial package of supports ever presented by any party for carers in a single budget. And that means the means test, which we all know unfairly excludes thousands of carers from receiving the carers allowance, being abolished. That is why we are very clear. Sinn Féin and government will abolish the means test for carers. Starting this year, it should start with a significant expansion of the scheme. We called for increasing the threshold for carers from €900 to €1,460 for a couple. That's 5 times what the government did last year and 10 times what the government announced this year. Now, you did make an announcement, but riddle me this. Why did you single out carers? Why are carers the only category of people that have to wait to July to get the benefit of what you announced? Well, what has carers done? Why are they not able to benefit like anybody else in January the 1st? Do you want the floor to answer the question?
It's the last referendum.
Why is the carers allowance means test not available to them in January, and why did you signal them out as the only category that have to wait a further 6 months? And it is disrespectful to carers, the work that they do, and as I said, again, what needed to be done here was an announcement of abolishing the means test. That would really make a meaningful difference in the lives of many carers. For many, they are locked out of support that they need. Hiwan Gaeltart Chinmid gohfuil 5 milliún Hiwan Gaeltart agus an Cantry Gaelic ag titim sa Gaeltart. Nílach teile a bhain is an chuig ag tógal a glóine le Gaelic agus caihinis cai gohfuil sa gnáda aige de seo mar bhíse mar ara stéit na Gaeltart. €6 milliún brise a chuir fáil sa Gaeltart. Níl seo mai go leor a Harbí agus daoine agus daoine eile ag scartú má le abhiohan na Gaelic sa Gaeltart. Tá freigra ag Sinn Féin ar Virginia policy an tásaí a chorús €45 billion brise is dean cisin na Gaeilge agus na Gaeltarte. Ag tuairtaí do údras na Gaeltarte, do Chile, do Mretí, agus cinnte go mbeadh ara tíhíocht agus ara sinseire Gaeltarte, dírithe ar cisin na tíhíocht a fásta. Thuirimid €5 brise in ahan foiiste dógáil trí Gaelic, faoi scéim Lord na Gaeilge agus go leor mór le na cáis. We have seen over the last while that the tax revenue is here. The country is recording surpluses. The government has had time and they've had money, but they've failed to make an impact. These high levels of corporation tax gives us a window of opportunity to address the infrastructure deficits and to build the houses at scale. But we have to cut through the spin. And that is why each budget that you have announced has failed to make the difference. What people are crying out for, that this budget wouldn't just paper over the cracks. Workers are still worse off in real terms than when this government came to power, and workers and families can't afford another 5 years of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Every day this government is in office, they squander valuable time, but they also squander taxpayers' money. And it was interesting in the 45 minutes that Pascal Donoghue, even though he's in charge of the OPW, didn't mention any of the projects that he's wasting millions on. The bike shed, the National Children's Hospital, the security hut, houses for Ukrainians that have gone, what, 120% increase, and you try to preach prudence and fiscal rectitude. This budget was supposed to be about giving people hope, but it doesn't. I think when the dust settles, people will see through this budget, like they have all the others, they will see it for what it is, more of the same and less than we need. A government that has no big ideas, not one big idea put forward by this budget, but a government that has all the resources. A government that is incapable of delivering the change that is required. A government and a budget that fails to deliver on the basic things, the things we should be taken for granted. A roof over your head, healthcare when you need it, a wage you can live on, and making sure our children are protected and secure and treated when they need that support at that time. But there is an alternative, and we have shown that the alternative is there. The alternative is Sinn Féin, and we'll put our plans, our vision, our determination to the people. So I say to Simon Harris, let's call the election, let's put this to the people, and let the people decide who takes in the next budget.